Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and today we are going to be making 3 holiday desserts that have the traditional holiday flavors that are usually actually pies, but we are not going to be making pies today. We're gonna take those traditional flavors, play around with them, and make them into something new and exciting. I have a Friendsgiving in 2 days, and we're gonna make all of these desserts 2 days in advance so that on the day of the party, desserts is one thing I am not gonna have to think about. So here I am gonna make a caramel sauce for the first dessert we're gonna get going in the oven. I just added 3/4 of a cup of granulated white sugar to this heavy bottom saucepan because we need to make a caramel sauce. So this first dessert, I'm actually gonna go ahead and preheat the oven as well, is going to be a pumpkin spice cake with a cheesecake swirl in the middle. Cheesecake is one of my favorite ways to prep desserts in advance for holidays because usually they taste better if you make them 2 or 3 days in advance and they sit in the fridge. So here I'm gonna turn this sugar on very low. And while that is starting to cook, I'm gonna measure out the rest of the ingredients we need. We need butter, salt, and some heavy cream. The second dessert we're gonna be making today is gonna be an apple bourbon bundt cake with crystallized ginger, and it's gonna be delicious. And then the third dessert we're gonna be making is going to be a pecan pie brownie. So here I've got 4 tablespoons of butter. Now I'm gonna measure out 1/3 cup of cream. I will link all of these recipes down below for you. And I'm gonna go pop this in the microwave for 30 seconds to heat it up just a bit. So now what we're gonna do is just wait for this sugar that is on this pretty medium-high heat to dissolve. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm gonna add 2 pinches of salt to our warmed cream. We're gonna use this caramel for 2 parts of our pumpkin cheesecake cake recipe. We're gonna use it inside the cake, and then we're also gonna use it as a topping to decorate the cake with when it's all done and we assemble the cake right before we eat it. The sugar is just starting to melt around the outside of the pan. So what we're supposed to do is take a spatula and slowly push the melted sugar to the inside. And I'm using an organic sugar, and so it starts out a little bit darker than a bleached white sugar. The recipe said to use a 1 or 2 quart saucepan. I started out with a 1 quart, and I just transferred this into a 2 quart because it said a larger one is actually better. And it said that it was gonna get kind of crumbly and crispy before it all melted, but to make sure it completely melts and there's absolutely no chunks of sugar left before we move on to the next step, or this caramel will get grainy. I always get a little bit nervous when making caramel, so that's why I started with this. This is probably the most complicated part of all of these recipes we're gonna be making today. The rest of it is gonna be easy, easy, easy. But I don't mind challenging myself when baking, especially for a holiday. So I don't mind pushing myself just a little bit to make this caramel sauce to make a delicious, decadent holiday dessert. I just turned the heat down a little bit because I didn't want it to get too dark before all of our sugar dissolved. I'm also gonna grab a pastry brush and some water. And I'm going to melt any sugar that's on the outside here.
If you wanted to skip this step and not make your own homemade caramel sauce, go get your favorite caramel sauce from the store and just use that in the actual recipe. You could use that in the cake and as the decoration. I just want to try to build my skills of making caramel, and so I chose to push myself and make the caramel sauce, and it turns out really, really well. I think the key to this is low and slow and making sure every single bit of sugar is dissolved before adding the rest of the ingredients.
What I'm doing is pushing my spatula against any unmelted sugar pieces to make sure those get melted in all the way. We have this beautiful amber color and all of the sugar is dissolved. So I'm going to turn the heat off and I'm going to whisk in my cream and salt. This is going to bubble up like crazy. along with my butter. So it's gonna clump up, but it's gonna melt again with the residual heat that's on the stove and with the heavy-sided pan. Oh, it smells incredible. I'm gonna turn the heat back on just a little bit to melt the rest of that caramel. There is our salted caramel. Now, one thing I do when I make a caramel sauce like this is I get paranoid because you can seed crystals of sugar into your caramel, and that's what makes it grainy and not smooth. So when I would take out a wooden spoon after mixing it before I added the cream and things, I just decided to not use these because they have sugar crystals on them, and that could make for a grainy caramel, and I don't want that. So I will just wash those, so it does create a little bit extra dishes. I'm not an expert caramel maker, but that's what I do, and that has helped me at least not get a grainy caramel sauce. And this is our beautiful caramel sauce. So we're just gonna let this cool. This is going to be a caramel sauce that we're gonna be able to drizzle. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a taste here. It is obviously molten hot, so I'm not going to put that into my mouth until it cools off a little bit. Oh my goodness. A splash of vanilla. That is our caramel sauce. I'm gonna give it one more little taste. You could skip that step if you wanted, if you have a favorite store-bought caramel sauce. So now let's go ahead and make our cake batter. This cake has 3 components. We just finished the first component. Now we're gonna make the cheesecake portion of this dessert. And this is where it's really easy because everything just gets dumped into the mixer and we mix it together. We're gonna start with 2 blocks of softened cream cheese. I just plopped those in the microwave for about 30 seconds because I forgot to take them out of the refrigerator in time. And to that, we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and we're gonna mix this together until nice and smooth. Scrape the sides. The sugar is now well incorporated into that cream cheese, so we're gonna add our 2 eggs. One. 2. Now I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of sour cream, 3 tablespoons of our caramel sauce. So the cheesecake portion of this cake is caramel, and the cake portion of our cake is pumpkin. I'm gonna add a pinch of salt and a couple good splashes of vanilla. I just rinsed out my bowl, and now we're gonna make the pumpkin cake portion of this dessert. So we have 2 of the 3 components done, and this is gonna come together really easy. We can, again, mix this all in this mixer. I'm gonna start with 1 cup of pumpkin puree. This is some homegrown pumpkin puree. I strained it a little bit because it tends to be a little bit waterier than canned pumpkin. Now I'm gonna add my white sugar to this. 1 large egg. I'm using avocado oil for our neutral flavored oil. I'm gonna go ahead and mix that together until smooth. I'm gonna pour in some vanilla. And now I'm gonna go ahead and just measure out my dry ingredients right on top of my wet ingredients. So this is all-purpose flour, salt, baking powder, baking soda, pumpkin pie spice. I'm gonna go ahead and mix those dry ingredients together a little bit right on top. And then I'm just gonna slowly incorporate this. And the recipe said right before it's done mixing, slowly pour in your milk and then finish mixing to combine, but not to overmix. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and finish mixing that by hand. And that is our cake batter. I'm just gonna mix this a couple times by hand. And now we are done with all 3 of our components for this dessert. This is the fun part where we get to put our components together. And the nice thing about this cheesecake recipe is you do not have to use a water bath to make this, so it makes it for a really, really easy cheesecake recipe. And if I did not mention it earlier, I will link all these recipes below. So I just took a 9-inch piece of parchment paper and cut it down to an 8-inch piece of parchment paper, because we are gonna be making this cheesecake in an 8-inch springform pan. And I'm gonna spray this with something you all have told me that I need to get for a long time, and that is a cooking spray with flour already in it. So I'm just gonna spray this. I bought this mostly for the bundt cake that we're gonna be making, but I figured I would try it with this cheesecake as well. So that's well sprayed now at this point. Probably sprayed a little more than it needs to be. It smells good. I don't think that's something I would probably use in my everyday baking, but when it comes to a holiday dessert where I really wanna make sure it turns out well, you all have given me really good reviews on that, so I figured I would go ahead and give it a try. So what we're gonna do first is layer 1/3 of our batter, of our pumpkin batter, in the bottom of the springform pan. And this recipe does say to use an 8-inch springform pan, which most cheesecake recipes call for a 9-inch, and I just bought a 9-inch. This is my old one that I've had for a long time. So I was able to pull my old one out. So it's actually good now that I have a 9-inch one and an 8-inch one. Now I'm gonna put 1/3 of this cheesecake batter on here. We are gonna bake this for 15 minutes at the 350 degrees, and then I'm gonna reduce the temperature to 325 degrees and bake it just like that. So no need for this recipe for a water bath, so that makes it really easy. And we officially have our first recipe done, other than when we top it with our whipped cream topping and drizzle it with our caramel sauce. So now let's get going on our second recipe that needs to be baked as well. And that is going to be our bourbon apple bundt cake. And I'm gonna get this oven preheated to 350 degrees because we need this one preheated as well. And I read that wrong. We need it at 325 degrees. I just washed out my KitchenAid bowl because this bundt cake is gonna come together just in this one bowl. No need to get out a second bowl. But there are a couple things that we need to do before we can actually start making the cake batter. And we've got a couple items here that we're gonna prep. So first off, what we're gonna do is take some of this candied ginger. We need a 1/2 cup of candied ginger, which I have never bought before. And, ooh, it smells good. This just screams the holidays to me. I have seen lots and lots of recipes over the years call for candied ginger, and this is the first time I'm gonna incorporate it into a cake. But what we need to do, because this candied ginger is pretty chewy, we wanna actually soften it a little bit. And so what we're gonna do is actually soak this in a little bit of bourbon, and that's what's gonna give us our bourbon flavor. So this bundt cake is an apple bourbon bundt cake. with a glaze on the top. And if you did not want to use the bourbon, you could substitute, instead of using bourbon, just apple cider. So in the US, we call non-alcoholic, fresh pressed, non-filtered apple juice apple cider. And I know that over in the UK, you call apple cider is alcoholic. So we call an alcoholic apple juice hard cider. So if you're following me, you could use a non-alcoholic apple cider if you wanted to. And we need a half a cup of this. So I just diced it up a little bit, and I'm gonna measure this out, which that looks like about perfect. And this recipe calls for bourbon in the cake and for the glaze, but I'm only gonna put bourbon in the cake because I don't want it too bourbon-y. I think just a hint of it will be good. And I'm gonna substitute apple cider for the glaze. I'll go over more of that when we get to that part. I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons to our ginger. We're gonna let that soften up just a little bit. So I'm gonna set that aside. And while that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and prep our apples. I have 2 Granny Smith apples here that I have washed, but I am gonna peel them. I read a bunch of comments and a bunch of people said they did not peel them, but I'm gonna take the time to go ahead and peel them. The last thing that needs to be prepped for this cake is we actually need to go ahead and toast up some pecans. And I happen to have some nice roughly chopped pecans here, so I don't even have to take that step to chop them. And I got these from Azure Standard. I buy almost all of my baking goods and bulk goods from Azure Standard. I can link them down below. They specialize in organic, and I have been using this company for years. I keep my nuts in the freezer. So all I'm gonna do with this bag, I should have cut this a little bit neater. I'll go ahead and just cut the top off, is I will fold this over, put a clip on it, throw this in my freezer, and that way I can keep my nuts nice and fresh. But I'm gonna go ahead and get these right in this oven with my cheesecake. And those will just toast for a few minutes while we make our cake batter, because our cake batter is now gonna come together really quickly, and we'll get it all done right in this KitchenAid. So all I did was rinse out this KitchenAid because we're gonna be using a lot of the same ingredients. So I didn't need to actually go through the effort of scrubbing my KitchenAid. And I have 2 sticks of butter or 1 cup of butter. And we're gonna cream this together with our brown sugar. It said for a good 5 minutes. And this is what's gonna help make this a light and fluffy. Now I'm gonna add my room temperature eggs. I just had these in some warm water so that they would come up to room temperature, because I did not get these out either. And in that, I had my water running on them. I walked away to grab out some other ingredients, and I spilled water all over my floor, but that's okay. Now my floor is nice and clean, and I'm gonna get these eggs mixed in here one at a time. I'm so excited for this cake. It already smells incredible between the ginger and the apple. And I love a bundt cake because they're so easy and they always look so pretty as long as they come out of the bundt pan. The last few bundt cakes I have made have not come out of the bundt pan. That's why I finally went and bought that baking. Well, you guys had recommended a specific brand called Baker's Joy, I think. And my grocery store did not have that, but they had the one that I got, and I think it's the same thing. So I'm hoping it will work the same way, because you all had told me it works really well. And I used to have no problems getting things out of my bundt pan, but my bundt pan is all scratched up. And I think that's why things are not coming out of it very well. So I actually borrowed my mother-in-law's bundt pan that's not scratched like mine. And we're gonna see if that helps with a nice, beautiful cake. So now we got our eggs mixed in here. We can add in our dry ingredients. to start with our dry ingredients, we're gonna start with 1 or 2, I should say, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon baking soda, cinnamon, and I'm using pumpkin pie spice just to reduce how many spices I need to get out. So I just put in 2.5 teaspoons of that. I'm gonna slowly mix that together. And now that the dry ingredients are halfway incorporated, I'm gonna mix in 1 cup of full fat sour cream and vanilla. Mix that together. And then I'm gonna pour in the bourbon that we use to soak our ginger in. I'm gonna scrape the sides of the bowl. I'm gonna get my nuts out of the oven so they can cool a little bit. We're gonna add our ginger and our apples. I'm gonna mix that together a couple times. Now I'm gonna add my toasted pecans. And that right there, my friend, is our bourbon apple bundt cake, minus the glaze that we're gonna put on the top. So now I'm gonna go ahead and prepare my bundt pan, or my mother-in-law's bundt pan, I should say, with our cooking spray. I'm gonna be pretty generous with it. I really want this cake to come out. I think we're gonna call that good. This stuff smells good. Oh, there's coconut oil in it. That's what I think I'm smelling, because it smells a little sweet. There's other oils in it too. Now this recipe says to put this in a 10-cup bundt pan. And I'm not sure how big this bundt pan is. And I can see why we're baking this at a lower temperature at 325 as opposed to 350, because this is going to take a solid hour to bake, I think. I love using holidays and parties as an excuse to try new recipes. I do love the traditional, you know, pecan pie and pumpkin pie and apple pie and things like that, but I like trying new recipes, and I feel like the holidays is the perfect excuse. I do not want to fill that anymore. I think this is a little bit smaller than a 10-inch or a 10-cup bundt pan. So I'm just gonna make a couple cupcakes with this little bit of batter that we have here, because I don't want to overfill this bundt pan. This just means we are gonna have a little cake snack this afternoon. The recipe says this is gonna take 1 hour and 10 minutes to bake. I'm gonna set a timer for 1 hour, and then we will check it at that point. So the 2 recipes that are baking right now are going to be for my Friendsgiving, and I'm making them 2 days in advance. I'm gonna show you how they're just gonna be delicious the day of the party to make holidays that much easier. This one we're gonna cut into tonight, and we are going to give it a try. I think it will be absolutely delicious. Now, I am someone who does like brownies the next day better than the day of, but these just look so good. I wanna give them a try. And whatever we don't eat tonight, we'll serve for the Friendsgiving. Now, the nice thing about this next recipe too, is all we need is a mixing bowl. And I'm gonna weigh out all these ingredients. The recipe that I'm gonna link for you that I'm making has both weight and cups and measures, depending on whatever you're more comfortable with. And I'm gonna prep my pan here real quick. I'm gonna just crinkle my parchment paper. That way it stays in place a little bit better. And I'm gonna line this 8x8 baking dish. And I have an oven preheated to 350 degrees. I love measuring when I can because it's really easy now that I'm comfortable with it, that you can just dump things into one bowl and you actually mess up less dishes. I'm going to go ahead and do it in grams because that's the easiest I have found than ounces. We're going to start with 1 stick of butter, which should be about 113 grams of butter, or a half a cup. That's 116. I'm going to call that good. Next, I'm going to add semi-sweet chocolate chips, 1 cup or 180 grams. I'm going to go ahead and microwave this and melt the butter and chocolate together. So now that our chocolate and our butter have melted, I microwaved them for 30 seconds and then I stirred it, microwaved it for 30 seconds and stirred it, and now it is all melted. So we're gonna get the rest of our ingredients in here. I'm gonna zero this out. I'm gonna add 200 grams of white sugar. I'm always looking for a good homemade brownie recipe. I'm gonna zero that out. This is not in the recipe, but I can't help myself. I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla. Zero that out. That was my timer for my cheesecake, and I think it's done. Yep, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn the oven off. Now, a lot of times when I make cheesecake is I will actually let it cool in the oven, but this recipe says not to do that. It says to take it out of the oven, let it cool out of the oven, and it says that it's okay that it cracks. It did definitely crack. And we are gonna cover that up with some beautiful whipped cream. So this needs to cool a little bit. It feels perfect. Has a little jiggle to it, but I know that when it sets in the fridge, it'll be perfect. So we're gonna come back to our brownies, and I need to mix in 2 eggs. I'm gonna go ahead and zero that out because the final ingredient we need to add to this is our all-purpose flour and our salt. And we need 80 grams, which is 2/3 cup of flour. Right there. No leavening agents in this at all. And I probably should have mixed my egg in with the chocolate first and the sugar, but I did not do that. So I'm gonna try to mix the egg over here in the corner real quick, get it a little mixed before we start mixing in the flour, just because I don't want too much gluten formation. So now that that's mixed in, I'm not gonna whisk this. I'm just gonna use my spoon that I had earlier, and I'm gonna gently mix this together. So that was really easy. This is the brownie batter part. We do need to make the pecan pie topping, but we can make that while this is baking in the oven. Oh, I think there's supposed to be cocoa powder in here too. There is. So this is a double chocolate brownie. I'm glad I checked that. I'm gonna go ahead and zero that out. And we want grams. We need 24 grams of cocoa powder. Now our brownie batter is done. Just gonna break up any lumps with the back of my spoon here before I mix it all together. That looks like brownie batter now. Our apple cake is still baking, but the cupcakes came out a little bit ago, and I'm gonna go ahead and give it a try since I can. So this recipe isn't completely done because we are gonna put an apple cider glaze on it. I thought I was gonna be able to taste ginger, or like chewy bits of ginger. I can taste the ginger, but it's like they melted in there, but you get the texture of the pecans and the warmness of the spices and the apple. I'm barely tasting the bourbon. Oh, there it is. It's more in the smell. And it really adds a complexity to this. That is so good. But I'm not gonna add any more bourbon to it. I like the level of bourbon in this. I just had each member of my family try one of those cupcakes, which was perfect because it made 3 cupcakes and they were scarfed down and greatly enjoyed. Even Josh, who's not a huge nut person, really enjoyed that cupcake. So I'm excited to see how the bundt cake turns out, if I can get the bundt to turn out all the way. Here is our cheesecake, which is perfect. I just took this outside ring off. It did not stick at all. I think that spray worked really well. Once this is completely cool, it's still pretty hot on the bottom, I will wrap it, pop it in the fridge, and in 2 days, we will finish this cheesecake. This will be perfectly fine in the refrigerator for 2 days while we get ready for our Friendsgiving over the next 2 days. We need to make the pecan topping for our brownies, but I wanna take a peek at this cake and see. I think I'm gonna give it just a couple more minutes and then I'm gonna go ahead and pull it out. I just melted 3 tablespoons of butter, and this pecan topping is gonna come together really easily. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and mix it in a bowl, and I'm gonna weigh out all the ingredients minus the salt and I guess the egg and the salt, because it needs butter, vanilla, an egg, a good pinch of salt, 125 grams of pure maple syrup, 70 grams, of brown sugar. 125 plus 70 is what? I forgot to tare it. Is 195. I'm gonna go ahead and tare that, and now I'm gonna add my chopped pecans. 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons, or 140 grams. And again, I don't have to chop these, and we don't have to toast these because they're gonna be toasted in the oven. And that is our pecan pie topping for our brownie. So that was easy. I have the timer set for the brownies for 20 minutes, and once they bake for 20 minutes, we'll put this topping on, and then we will finish baking the brownies with this topping. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get my that feels done. Cake out of the oven. I've lost my other pot holder. I think I have like 6 or 7 pot holders, and I can only find one of them right now. So I'm gonna use this dishcloth here. Get this out. I'm gonna let this cool for 10 minutes, and then we are going to attempt to pop this out of this bundt pan. I'm really glad that I did not put all of that cake batter in here, because I think it would have overflown a little bit. And I can get this top oven off. Day 1 of this baking day is basically done. Once this is cooled, I'm gonna wrap this, and then I will turn this out. Once that completely cools, I will wrap this, and I am going to put this cake in the freezer. Cake freezes beautifully, bundt cakes freeze beautifully. So if you want to do a little bit of prep, whether you're a guest for a dinner party or you're the one doing all of the cooking, you can always make your cakes in advance, wrap them. I always wrap them 2 or 3 times with saran wrap, pop them in my freezer, and then they thaw. And on the day of, we will put the glaze on, and we will put the topping on here with our caramel. Now the brownies have about another 15 minutes to go. I have a disaster of a kitchen to clean up. So in that 15 minutes, I'm gonna see if I can get my dishwasher loaded and all of the ingredients put away. And we are well on our way to our Friendsgiving for 2024. I didn't quite get the dishes done, but I'm about 90% done. But it's time to go ahead and put our pecan topping on our brownies. So now we're gonna put this back in here for another 20-ish minutes. I got this dishwasher as full as it could get. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this turned on. And now we're gonna go ahead and turn out our cake on. I will do some dishes by hand, but I wanted to get my dishwasher going first. Need a good cooling rack. I can see that the cake has pulled away from the sides, which is a good sign. Still pretty hot, but it's been about 10 minutes. Oh. Yes, okay. Ah, we did it, friend. Okay, so now that I changed two variables, I don't know if it's my mother-in-law's bundt pan with no scratches or that baking spray. The baking spray does have a couple ingredients in it that are not my favorite. So I'm gonna try to make that myself. I have heard that America's Test Kitchen has a homemade recipe version of that, where basically you mix flour and butter together or flour and oil together. Because what's nice about it is you don't get the flour crusty look on bundt cakes when you coat them with oil or butter and then flour. I just really wanted this to work, so I bought that, and then maybe I will try to make a homemade version. But whew, I'm very excited about that. So we're gonna let that cool. And I was thinking I could go ahead and make up the glaze that we're gonna soak this cake on right now. And then we might glaze it. I did read a couple of the comments, and someone said they actually glaze it in the bundt pan so that the glaze doesn't, you know, go all over the counter. It stays in the bundt pan and all the glaze can be soaked up. It smells so good. The recipe for this glaze is a half a cup of bourbon, a half a cup of sugar. You boil that on the stove and you make a simple syrup with the juice of half a lemon. And I don't want to add that much bourbon flavor to this because I don't think my family will like that. The hint that is in here is delicious, but I think if I put a half a cup on this, that'll be too much. So what I think I'm going to do, what I was going to do, was going to make a glaze with sugar, lemon juice, and apple cider juice. But this cake is plenty sweet. It's delicious. So what I think I'm gonna do is skip the glaze for now. If I decide to do the glaze, I will do it the day we have our Friendsgiving. But just the way it is like this, you could put a powdered sugar topping on the top, which is what I might do. Or, I don't know, should I make a glaze? I'm trying to decide what I wanna do. I'm gonna make the glaze because I know that I'm not gonna wanna do that the day of the party. And that is one of the things about when you're prepping things in advance, is try to get as many things done as you can. And if I choose not to use the glaze on the cake, I could use it as a cocktail simple syrup. This is not gonna take long to come together. Basically, we're just looking to melt the sugar. I'm gonna put a half a cup of sugar and a half a cup of cider and the juice of half of a lemon. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this off, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and put this on my cake now. So one of the comments I read, I think that was absolutely brilliant, was to, oh, I don't wanna break my cake. Actually put it in the cake pan, put a couple holes in it. I'm gonna try to transfer this cheesecake onto this plate. I never take cheesecakes off the bottom, but I put a parchment paper on there, so I think I can do it. Here we go. So even though I damaged it a little bit on the top from doing that, we're gonna cover it with a whipped cream, so it will be just fine. I didn't realize if I put parchment paper on the bottom of this, I'd be able to transfer a cheesecake that easily. This smells incredible. Oh my goodness. Okay. Ooh, look at that. Yum. I'm gonna cut a little piece off and we're gonna give that a taste test today. And then I'm gonna wrap everything up once they're completely cooled, and I will be serving this for the Friendsgiving. And then I wanted to show you my sink. I've got my dishwasher loaded and going, but my sink still has some dishes in it, and I probably won't get to those until tomorrow when the dishwasher is unloaded and loaded back up. I'll show you what this looks like when it cuts beautifully. It's obviously not cutting that beautifully right now because it's still really hot, but I want to give this a taste test. And then if you want to know how I'm going to make dinner tonight and make it really easy on myself, is I pulled out 2 steaks. Last time we did a big freezer cooking day, we had marinated some steaks. I pulled those out. Those are thawing. In probably about a half an hour, I'll turn on the grill. I'll grill those up. And last week we did some Thanksgiving sides and we made a bunch of sweet potatoes, and I still have some of those. I probably have enough just to go along with the steaks tonight, so I'm not gonna cook anything but grill up some steaks. And then tomorrow we're gonna meal prep a ton of things for the Friendsgiving that is in 2 days. This is like ooey and gooey right now because it's still so hot, but this is gonna be so good, I think. I was gonna go in for another bite. I'm not gonna do that because I wanna save those. That is the perfect salt and sweet, and the maple. A lot of pecan pie recipes call for corn syrup, and that had maple syrup. And now I think I wanna play around with an actual pecan pie and substitute corn syrup for maple syrup. I don't know why you couldn't do that, because that flavor is so awesome. So we have a take on a pecan pie, but pecan brownies, take on an apple pie, but an apple cake. And once this is completely cool, I'll wrap this in a bunch of saran wrap and pop that in the freezer. And then once this is completely cool, I'll wrap this and pop this in the fridge. And I will take this out the morning of the party, and I will take this out when I put the topping on the top. We have a whipped cream topping we're gonna put on the top, and then we're gonna drizzle some of that caramel that we made to go on the top of that. And that is our 3 desserts. I'll see you in 2 days. We are back. It is the day of the party, so I'm gonna finish off these desserts. So this has been in the refrigerator since Monday. Today is Wednesday, the day of the party. I had to think about that for a second. I went ahead and I wrapped my brownie in 2 layers of plastic wrap and froze it, and I just got it out this morning and thawed it, and it looks beautiful. So we're gonna cut that up and get that on a serving dish. This is our cheesecake that we need to make the whipped cream topping. This has been in the refrigerator, and then I pulled my bundt cake out this morning of the freezer, and it is still thawing. So here's our beautiful, beautiful cheesecake. It's a little cracked on the top, but no big deal there because we are gonna cover that up with a whipped cream topping. I'm gonna make enough whipped cream topping to top our cheesecake and our cake because there's no frosting going on our bundt cake. I think it would be pretty and a little nice to have a creamy element instead of frosting. When I cut into the cake, I can dollop a piece or a dollop of whipped cream on it. So in here, I just put probably about 2 cups of cream. This is how easy it is to make whipped cream. You do not need to buy it if you don't want to, because all it is cream, a little bit of powdered sugar. I go light on the powdered sugar because I don't like my whipped cream too sweet. Our cakes are plenty sweet, and then a good amount of vanilla. And all you do, I'm gonna start this on low, I'm gonna slowly work it up, and then I'm gonna take a towel, throw it over the top, and turn it on high. And while this is whipping, I'm gonna go pop our caramel sauce in the microwave for about 30 seconds so we can drizzle it over the top. So I have a container here that I'm gonna put the whipped cream in that we're gonna serve with our cake. I'll just pop that in the fridge and we'll use this later tonight. I think I'm gonna whip in just a little bit of gelatin in this to keep this a little bit firm because it's only 236 right now, and we aren't gonna be probably having this till closer to 7. I wanted to get this done now because I've got a lot of other things I need to get to with our Friendsgiving. And so this is one less thing I'm gonna have to think about later. But I have found if you put about just a teaspoon or so of unflavored gelatin in your whipped cream, it holds a beautiful set, but it doesn't make it thick or weird or anything. Nobody wants a weird or thick whipped cream. We want light and fluffy. But the beauty of whipped cream or even frosting is you can cover up multitude of what could be perceived as a few imperfections in this cheesecake, but it won't change the taste because it cracked on the top. I'm gonna just get this. I'm gonna kind of put some swirls on the top. Now I'm gonna go ahead and cut into my brownie. I have my serving plate here. And let's see, I kind of dug into this corner a little bit, so look at that, beautiful. I trimmed these up nicely so they had nice square corners. This is the leftovers and this is what we can snack on before the party tonight. So here's our 3 desserts for tonight's party. And I'm gonna pop this in the fridge uncovered. I'm gonna cover this, pop this in the fridge. This is just gonna sit out and continue to thaw, and then I'll uncover it right before the dinner. This is gonna go in the fridge. We'll serve that with that. And there is our desserts. I will show you what these look like when we cut into them and serve them, and give you a review on how each of these desserts ranked and our favorite. They are all very different because we kind of have like chocolate pecan, apple, bourbon, and cinnamon pumpkin, or caramel pumpkin. And so they're not, it's hard to compare because we're not comparing 3 chocolate desserts, but we can still let you know what we think of them and which ones I would make again and show you what they look like when we cut into them. I think they're gonna be delicious. I think this is a fun way to put a little fun twist on some holiday classic flavors, but just in a different way.
It was too hard to rank these from top to bottom because they're so different. It's hard to compare them, but I'll tell you what we thought of each one of these. The apple cake was delicious, but I think that what I would do next time is, instead of doing a half a cup of juice and half a cup of sugar to make the syrup to put on the cake, I would take 1 cup of apple cider, reduce that to a half a cup, and use that. I don't think it needed the extra sugar, but it was delicious. The cheesecake, I would keep exactly the same, except I did add salt on the top. That wasn't in the recipe, and the little bit of crunchy salt on the top really took this incredibly beautiful cheesecake over the top. Look at how beautiful that is. This was amazing. And then the pecan pie brownies, I would keep exactly the same. Those were so chewy, and the fact that I froze them and thawed them the day of the party, they were delicious. Texture was on point, and all of these desserts were a winner, even though I would change that one thing about the apple cake. So friend, I want to thank you so much for being here as we did all of this fun baking. And if you want to watch more videos, I'll pop them here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.